Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Rosemary from Frontier Kids Care, and we have a really special guest with us today, her name is Professor Christine Carrington. She is a virologist, and she's also a Frontier Kids Care mom. Welcome, Professor Carrington.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Frontier Kids Care mom.
Thank you.
Thank you too. And, we help people at Frontier, we help parents at Frontier Kids Care who are anxious about their child's well-being in health, learning, and parenting. Well, the elephant in the room today is that COVID-19 virus. Everyone is anxious about it. It has upended our lives, and we really want to get some answers today. So we're going to ask Professor Christine. Can we call you Professor Christine?
You can call me Christine.
No, I'm going to call you Professor Christine to answer some of these questions for us. Now, Professor Christine Carrington has a really impressive CV, but we're not going to go into that too much because she's a very humble sort of person. But we just want to say she's a professor of virology at the University of the West Indies, and she's on the UE COVID-19 task force. And she's also a member of the advisory team to the Ministry of Health on the present COVID vaccine and virus situation. So over to you, Professor Carrington. Tell us, what is the virus? You're going to tell us something about the vaccine, the variants, and what we should be worried about and what we should be happy about.
Okay. All right. So thanks again for having me. Just to start off, I think a lot of people don't really understand what a virus is in the first place. It didn't mix up viruses with bacteria. They're very different things. So viruses are what we call the small infectious particles that are peculiar because they can only replicate themselves inside of a living cell. So they have to get into your body and they have to enter a cell inside your body in order to replicate and produce more viruses. That's very different from bacteria. Bacteria can grow in soil. They can replicate in food that isn't cooked properly. They can replicate on your skin. So it's very different. So it's a sort of intracellular parasite. So they go in there and they replicate inside your cells and they damage your cells. That cell damage leads to tissue damage, and tissue damage can damage organs, etc. And the virus that causes COVID-19, that virus called SARS-CoV-2, it infects it tends to infect cells in your nasal passages, in your respiratory tract and down in your lungs. And that's why it's associated with respiratory disease. That's why we get lung, difficulty breathing, coughing, sneezing, pneumonia. It's all because of the cells that the virus targets. Right. And as you know, the virus, the majority of people who get infected have relatively mild disease and can recover without any medical intervention. But there are some people who are at higher risk of severe disease, and those would be more elderly people and people with comorbidities. Now, what we are learning as well is that although the risk is lower in younger people and in children, they can still get infected, and you can get incidences of severe disease. So it's not, some people like to take it sort of lightly and say, oh, I'm young and, it don't affect young people. That's not the case. We're also learning that the virus can have long-term effects. So there are people who have been infected, they have recovered from the acute phase of the disease, and they're still suffering. They're having what we call long COVID. And let me put a disclaimer now, I am not a medical doctor, so I don't have all the background that Dr. Thomas has in medicine, but there's this phenomenon called long COVID, people having heart issues, fatigue that goes on for ages, neurological problems. So it's a very serious, we have to take it seriously. In terms of good news, we have these vaccines. There's so many vaccines that have been developed now. And luckily, we have now started having vaccines rolled out in Trinidad. I don't know if you have any other questions, but I can talk about the vaccine some more.
Yes, tell us about the vaccine now, because we are really, everybody, of course, is worried about the side effects, and we're also worried about when we will be able to immunize our children, because if we should. So tell us about the vaccines. Yes.
Right. So before I tell you about the vaccines that we have, I think it's important to understand how vaccines work. And I think when people understand how they work, they will appreciate the benefit of them. So when a person gets infected by, we're not talking about vaccine now, let's talk about the virus. When you're infected by the virus, as I said, the virus enters your body, it enters into your cells, and it starts to make copies of itself, okay? As it is, in order to do that, to make more copies of the virus, it has to make proteins, viral proteins have to be made. The virus particles of themselves and these proteins that the virus produces, when your immune system sees them, it recognizes them as foreign. Your immune system, one of its major role is to identify foreign proteins. So it sees these foreign things and it gets activated. So the immune system has to take a little while though to sort of size up the proteins and the virus and sort of work out what are the best tools that it can make to combat this virus, right? So it takes a little time. Yes, go ahead.
Professor, what is mRNA then versus DNA? Because we understand.
All right, okay.
mRNA
so
virus.
Let me explain how I'll come to that when after I explain the vaccine. So because that's important.
Yes.
So as or maybe I should back up. So the virus, when it enters your cells, each virus is like a little packet of genetic material, right? And genetic material, there are two types. There's one called DNA, our genetic material is DNA, and there's one called RNA, right? Which is we have RNA as well, but not as our primary genetic material. We use it to make proteins. Some viruses use RNA as their genetic material, and so the SARS-CoV-2 virus does that. So when it enters your cell, it brings in this little piece of RNA, which literally carries instructions for the cell, telling it how to make viral proteins so that the virus can be replicated. So it brings in these instructions in the form of RNA, and those instructions are read by the cell, and it makes these proteins and it's able to, and new virus particles are assembled, okay? So, as I said, when the immune system sees these foreign proteins, sees this foreign virus, it starts trying to work out what tools it should make. And it makes all these specific antibodies and develops these specific cells called T cells and B cells that specifically recognize that virus and can start fighting against it. So it's a bit of a war between your immune system and the virus. And when the immune system wins, you recover, you get better, the virus is cleared. Now, the important thing about the immune system is that the immune system has memory. It can remember what it has seen before. So those tools that it makes, it sort of puts them away on standby, okay? So the next time, if you're exposed to that virus again, those tools are ready to go. And the battle with the virus is much shorter so that you can clear that virus very quickly and you may not even get sick, okay? Now, in order to get those tools, we had to get infected, okay? And getting infected puts you at risk of disease, hospitalization, death, etc. It's not the best way to, achieve immunity to a pathogen because you're putting yourself at risk.
Yes.
What vaccines do is they trick the body, trick the immune system into believing that it has seen this virus before. And so the immune system prepares the tools, puts them away. So when you do encounter the virus, somebody with COVID-19 comes and coughs on you, right? And you do encounter the virus, those tools are ready and you can clear that infection. So it protects you against the virus in that way. So you're basically getting your immune system, you're giving it a chance to see some of the viral proteins.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And prepare for when the virus actually arrives. Exactly. So your immune system is ready. So the mRNA and the thing. So there's different ways, there's different types of vaccines. So there's different ways to convince your immune system that they've seen the virus. One way is to take the virus itself, so the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and kill it. All right. So you treat it with chemicals and stuff, and it's dead. It can't replicate, it can't cause disease, but the proteins are still there. And you use that as a vaccine. So the immune system sees that. Yes. Another way, which is the one way is used by the AstraZeneca vaccine. What that one does is it brings it uses another virus which doesn't cause disease. It's a totally different virus called an adenovirus. And that virus, instead of carrying its own genetic material, what they've done is they've put a small piece of the SARS-CoV-2 genetic material in it. Yes. And so when it enters your cell now, your cell is going to make that SARS-CoV-2 protein. It's called the spike protein. And the immune system will see it and prepare all the tools it needs to defend you against SARS-CoV-2 if you come across it later. So that's the viral vector vaccines like AstraZeneca. The other ones called the mRNA vaccines now. Yes. Those ones, what they do is they bring in, they're very simple. So they have a small piece of this RNA. So remember, the virus's genome is RNA. Yes. And they have a part of the virus's RNA, okay? And it's only the part that is required to make this spike protein. And it's sort of encased in a sort of oily bubble, right? Or a waxy, oily bubble. And that allows it, when you inject that now, it gets to your cells are surrounded by an oily, have a sort of membrane around them that's sort of oily or waxy, oily layer basically. Yes. And so when you take these sort of oil bubbles and full of this mRNA and you inject it into the person, the cells in the region where they've been injected, where that oily bubble is going to sort of merge with the envelope of your cells. It's like, you know, if you have two oil drops in a jar and they come close together, they will form one. So it allows it to deliver this mRNA into your cells, right? But I mean, but compared to the cell, the actual little these nanoparticles in the carrying the mRNA are very, 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 very small. So it does coalesce, but it's not like two huge things coming together. Yes. Literally delivers the mRNA, and then that mRNA provides the instructions for your cell to make these spike proteins, and the immune system says, here's the spike protein, let me create my tools. And I think the most important thing people need to appreciate is that what the vaccines are doing is mimicking exactly what the virus does, except that it's not causing disease. So when people worry about introduction of foreign RNA into their bodies, that's exactly what SARS-CoV-2 does. It arrives into your body and it delivers its RNA into your body. So the vaccine is a small piece of that RNA. So it's not something, it's whatever the vaccine is doing, the virus is doing it as well and doing it worse. Even people are very concerned about blood clots. Yes. Right? The rate at which those blood clots occur with the adenovirus vaccines like AstraZeneca and I think J&J, they've been seeing some small things. It's, I think it's like 4 in a million for the AstraZeneca, and I think 1 in a million for the other one of people. And if you compare that to SARS-CoV-2 infection, 16 out of every 100 people who gets infected will get blood clots. Right. All right. So you always have to look at the cost, the risk, and the cost and the benefits, right? And benefits, your chances with the vaccines is so much better than your chances with COVID-19. Yes. You wanted me to talk about the children, vaccines for children.
I'm going to interject here just for 1 second, Professor Christine, just to say that I got my COVID vaccine, okay?
Excellent.
Last week, and you just had a little mild headache, a little bit of just not feeling 100%.
Yeah, aches and pains and things like that.
But I felt that, well, I know that certainly I'm a frontline worker, and then age-wise and all of that, the risk of getting the virus is way lower than that of having the vaccine, or putting it the other way, the benefit of getting the vaccine is way more than the risk of anything that could happen from it.
And those side effects, those common side effects, the pain, might get chills and little aches and pains and stuff like that, headache. All of those are actually associated with the immune response kicking in. Exactly. So when in a normal viral infection, most of the symptoms that you get initially, right, this fever and thing, all of those are actually caused by your immune system trying to work overtime to try and get this thing cleared. So it's actually, you're getting the immune system going without the risk of disease.
Yes.
So it's you might feel awful, but it's nothing compared to how you will feel with a COVID-19 infection.
Can I ask another question? It would appear, I don't know if we don't know enough yet, and I don't know if this is your domain as such, but older people seem to be, when I say older, the more elderly, have fewer symptoms than people who are younger.
Yes, I don't know if that is, I've noticed that in some of the older people I know who've gotten vaccinated, because I know, people over 60 who've gotten vaccinated, and I've seen a lot of doctors who've gotten vaccinated on this round here. And the younger ones are the ones who are getting this 2 and 3 days of feeling out of sorts. And I don't know, I'm wondering if it is that the older people, I suspect their immune systems are probably a little slower in responding to the vaccine, and so they have maybe that's why their symptoms are less. I think at the end of the day they all arrive at the same point. But I think some of the younger people, maybe their very robust immune systems are just, kicking in really fast and hitting them for 6. But I mean, I have no, I don't know. I'm not an immunologist, but that's just a feeling I've guessed.
Science will tell us in time.
Yes, in time we will know.
But all I can say is, my father, who's 92, got it, and he felt absolutely nothing.
My parents were the same thing, absolutely nothing, but slight pain in the arm, but next day, no headache, nothing, just nothing. And then I have several friends several medical friends who had to take a day off and stuff like that because they didn't feel so well afterwards.
Yes. So, well, I guess time will tell, but I was happy that I was counted for a change in the younger group, because
yes.
So yes, thank you.
Yeah, so you were asking about children.
Yes.
So when you develop new vaccines and stuff, unless you're really targeting a disease that is, seen primarily or only in children, you really don't, we tend to exclude what we call vulnerable groups from the testing, from the clinical trials. So you exclude, young children, you would exclude pregnant women until you know that they've done a safety profile and stuff like that. Exactly. So all the trials that have been done, when you first started, they would have been done on sort of young, healthy adults, 18 to 30, and no comorbidities, nothing. So they did that first, and they would get safety information from that. And once they knew it was safe there, they said, well, let's extend the age group upwards, because remember, with COVID-19, the most vulnerable people are the older people. So the huge clinical trials that were done mainly in people from 18 to 18 and above. And I think there was one of the vaccines that did it from 16 and above. And they all worked very well. They were all very safe. So that's, but we've only tested them, at that point, we'd only tested them in those groups. So that is why they were approved for adults, right? The people at highest risk and the people who were actually used in the clinical trials. Having seen that they're working well and they're safe in that age group, they then went on to do testing in younger age groups. And I think, I can't remember all the details, but I think it's the Pfizer, they have done trials with ages 12 to 15, and I think they've had good results and no problems at all. And I am not aware whether any of the groups, I think they're going to start, different vaccine producers are going to start doing trials with children now.
Yeah.
So for the moment, the vaccine is not for children. The youngest age I know in the US, they're doing 16 and over.
16, yes.
We're doing 18 and over with AstraZeneca because that was tested on 18 and over. But eventually, with more studies and stuff, we will be able to extend them to other age groups, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, good.
And I think you had asked me last about the variants.
The variants. Everybody wants to know about the variants.
Right. So we could go back to when we talked about what happens when a cell gets infected.
Yes.
The virus comes into your cell and it introduces its genetic material and it starts making copies of the virus, basically. And one of the things that is copied is the actual genetic material. So that RNA that the virus brings in is copied. You get millions and millions of copies made. And sometimes during that copying process, you get errors being made. And those errors are called mutations. And it's perfectly expected, it's natural, it's normal, it occurs in all living things. When they replicate, you can get errors. Viruses replicate at they replicate at a very fast rate.
Yes.
And I mean, we take, a human generation is much more than a viral generation, okay?
Yes.
And so what you're seeing is the equivalent of millions of years of evolution that we would go through. You're seeing that in the virus in a year, right?
Yes.
So you get these mutations. Now, remember, I said the immune system is very specific. It recognizes those proteins. So when you get these variants of the virus that have a slightly different protein, the spike protein has been changed in some way because of the change in that genetic code. Sometimes the fit between the antibodies and the sort of immune system tools that were made, that fit between them is not as exact as it was for the other version of the virus, okay? Right. And that means that you can, for example, have somebody who was infected before and recovered. Some of these variants, because they're just that little bit different enough, they can reinfect the person. What we're finding though is that when they reinfect, usually the disease is less severe, all right? So it's not the immune response is just, it's good enough to protect you against disease, but it might not protect you from getting reinfected.
Yes.
Same thing is what is being seen with some of the vaccines. So the vaccine was made against a specific spike protein, right?
Yeah.
And so you produce our immune response against that specific spike protein, which deals with the vast majority of the SARS-CoV-2 circulating. But these variants now, slight mismatch. And so the immune system it's doing a good job. So the vaccine makes you get the immune response. And that immune response, what they're seeing is that it is not as good at preventing mild and moderate disease, but it still protects you against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. Good. All right. So it's just a slight mismatch with some of them. And what they're thinking, what the manufacturers are doing is trying to make sort of variants of the vaccine to deal with variants of the virus. Yes. And you're probably accustomed to this with influenza. Influenza every year. Influenza virus is, one that sort of evolves very rapidly. And every year they have to look and see, well, what is going to be the dominant type this year? And they have to make a vaccine to match that one. And sometimes because you have to predict, because it takes months to make the vaccine. So they have to predict each year what's going to come out with this influenza vaccine. And sometimes they get it 100% right and you have a fantastic influenza vaccine that year, and other times it's not so great. So it does still worth getting, will keep you out of hospital and stuff like that, but it may not prevent you from getting the sniffles and things like that. So
yes. As we're talking about the influenza vaccine, I get asked this a lot, and we know the answer, but just for you to tell people, is there any cross-reactivity? In other words, if you get the influenza vaccine, will it protect you against anything else, especially COVID, the SARS-CoV virus?
No, it will not. Viruses, when you think of viruses, you have to think about all the diversity we have in life. When you look out your window, all the different plants, all the different animals, the viruses have that amount of diversity amongst them, right? So there's a whole range of viruses. An influenza virus is as different from a coronavirus as a mouse is from an elephant. Yes. Okay, all right, so it's a totally different beast. So when your immune system sees an influenza virus and it creates tools to combat influenza virus, those tools are not going to work against the coronavirus.
Exactly.
So what you might get is you might get one coronavirus. You have different types of coronaviruses.
Exactly.
So you could get cross-reactivity among immune responses to one coronavirus to another one, right? So that can happen, but in terms of very different, I mean, a chickenpox vaccine is not going to protect you against influenza and things like that. Good. There are some, I should mention, that not everything about the immune system is specific. There's a sort of what we call the innate immune system, which is a sort of non-specific response. And there are some components of vaccines that can sort of boost that non-specific response and allow you to combat other things. But it's that's a sort of like a general response.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we had a treat here today. And just the last word, Professor Christine, on our mask wearing. We're tired of wearing the masks. We're tired of, the kids are not outside and we're told that being outside is better for them. We're hearing that the surfaces, it's not that important to senior surfaces as we had been before because of the state virus there. Tell us a little bit about that to just...
Right. So, of course, when this whole started back in, 2020, end of 2019, 2020, this virus was new to us. And we knew, the first thing we knew, it's a coronavirus. And we know that coronaviruses are respiratory viruses. And we know how respiratory viruses spread. Right. So that is where all the information came. Okay, wear a mask, clean your surfaces, wash your hands. All those things came from that. As we've gone through the past year, we have learned more and more about which one of those risk factors is most important. And it become more and more clear that the main factor that contributes towards the spread of this virus is person-to-person contact, close contact with other people, with an infected individual. And remember, you don't know who is infected, all right? People actually are infectious 2 days before they start showing symptoms. And some people who are infected never show symptoms. So you don't know who's infected. So it's that close contact. So it's about being with people. It's being within 6 feet. So the most important interventions are social distancing and wearing a mask. So those those particles, those droplets coming out of the infected person cannot get to you. The actual surfaces, surfaces can become contaminated. And if you touch a recently contaminated surface and sort of stick your finger in your eye or up your nose or in your mouth, you can get infected. So it is a possible route, but they found that it's not really playing that much of a role. So if you want to obsess about something, I would forget washing your groceries and obsess about wearing your mask and social distancing. And very important, staying at home when you're not feeling well. And just to, I can't emphasize this more, we are seeing rising cases now. And so it's really, really important that everybody does their part. Too many people are walking around saying, oh, well, I just went by I wasn't wearing my mask because I know this person. I know them well. I had a headache yesterday, but I'm feeling better now, so I'm going to work. You need to be careful. You need to, it's wear that mask, social distance, stay home when you're not feeling well. Okay.
And the last word, Professor Christine. I mean, we don't know, but where do you think this virus started?
Where did it start? Well, it's quite clear. Now, coronaviruses, right, are not new to us. We've known about coronaviruses for decades, okay? And there's been a lot of research that has been done. that shows that you can find coronaviruses in a wide range of animals. You find them in bats, you find them in birds, you can find them in whales, you can find them in, monkey, all different species carry coronaviruses, right? What we know from before is that bats harbor a wide variety of coronaviruses. And the SARS-CoV-2 virus is most closely related. When we look at its genetic material, you can see that it's most closely related to viruses, coronaviruses found in bats. Right. So we know that it originated in bats. What we don't know, these coronaviruses are known for what we call species jumps, from jumping from one species to the next. And what we don't know is if the virus that we have now in the human population came directly from bats. So if someone was exposed to a bat and it got infected and the virus sort of adapted to humans and then was able to spread, or if it went from bats to another animal species and then to humans. The idea that it was created in a lab is totally ridiculous. That it was manufactured in a lab, no. The idea that it escaped from a lab. So one theory is that scientists were working on natural coronaviruses and it escaped from the lab. While that is it's possible, it is improbable, it's very unlikely, and there is no evidence to support that, right? So they've looked and looked, and there's no evidence to say that this virus escaped from this lab in Wuhan. There is, however, mountains of evidence to suggest that it emerged from an animal population. And I just want to say that emergence of viruses from animal populations is not a new thing. It's been happening. It's where Ebola comes from. Yes. It's where chikungunya originally came from. It's where dengue originally was a virus in primates and monkeys. Yes. There's nearly 75% of the viruses that affect humans, we know that they emerged first from animal populations. Some of them recently, some of them thousands of years ago. Right. Okay. Gotcha. So it's not unusual and it's not surprising. Yes. And it's the conspiracy theories are not useful. Okay.
Good to keep us back. Well, I would just like to thank you, Christine, for this amazing. It was like I was in virology class. Wasn't it awesome? I think it was just fantastic.
I come from a long line of teachers.
Me too. So we have two docs in the house today. One is a professor virologist and one is just your regular good old pediatrician. But thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for taking time out to really come and tell us about it. And we will definitely be sharing this with our family and the world outside, our national community. Great. So thank you again for your time and take care and bye everyone. See you soon.
Bye everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.